What is a polite thing to do in the United States, but extremely rude in some other places? Tanzania. You never, ever take your shoes off unless you're at home by yourself, not at a person's house, and never out in public. When you get out of bed in the morning you put on slippers immediately, and some women refuse to even let their husbands see their feet. In the past few years walking around in socks has become more acceptable, but men still consider it taboo. In 24 years of marriage my dad said he saw my mother's feet twice, and both times it was an accident. If you go to the pool they have special shoes to wear, but in low income areas you'll just see 50 kids in the pool in their sneakers. Man, would it suck to have a foot fetish in Tanzania. I was in Greece and my dad put his hand up to say thank you to a car that allowed us to pass. We are from the UK. After they beeped at us we were informed by my uncle who lives in Greece it means something along the lines of frick off. It's a little curse, like a hex. Just holding up and waving isn't a problem, but doing it like an imaginary high five, that's the hand signal. In the United States, it's customary for the waiter/waitress to give you the check when your meal is presumed to be finished. He will ask if you want the check and give it to you if you say yes. But nearly everywhere else, you have to ask for the check because giving it to you is like demanding that you leave. Though giving you the check at the closing hours is totally normal and such, it's a polite way of telling the group to GTFO. Excuse me is not interchangeable with sorry in Canada, I've noticed. We use them the same, respectively, but I've gotten dirty looks for saying excuse me on multiple occasions. I say, excuse me, sorry when trying to get by someone who is in the way. Feels a bit less blunt than excuse me, and nobody here gives me any dirty looks. Apologizing to strangers just feels natural for some reason. I don't know about polite, but it's socially acceptable small talk to ask what someone does for a living in the States. In a lot of places it's considered an insult. Blowing your nose. Americans would rather you blow your nose and then be quiet instead of slurping snot back up into your nose every 6 seconds. When I lived there, it boggled my mind that the Japanese would rather you sniffle constantly than hear you blow your nose. Where I live US most students will excuse themselves from the classroom to blow their nose outside in the hallway so that they don't disrupt class. Unless there is a test going on the teachers typically allow them. Eye contact. Stares intently. I've been told that doing the peace sign with the back of your hand facing the other person actually means frick you in some countries. Is true. Very rude in England. Tipping people. For example, in Burundi tipping someone implies that the person receiving the tips is poor and unable to survive by themselves. I'm sure there are other places that feel the same though. Same thing in Japan, where I've been to several times. While I have no problem giving out tips in the US, it often feels like an obligation, so not being required to do so can feel quite refreshing in a way. It is considered incredibly insulting to call person older than you by their name in many countries. Also, calling your boss by their names is not considered a very good practice, and employees are encouraged to use sir, madam with bosses. Definitely some very different climates internationally between employees and managers that can be entertaining. I was in a meeting at the US subsidiary of an Italian company when some of the Italian brass were in for a meeting. The looks on their faces when one of the underlings piped up that something might not be the best of ideas was well worth the time. I spent several weeks last summer in Nairobi, Kenya last year, and learned a few things from experience. For example, I think this may be similar in other countries, but the OK gesture is extremely vulgar. I was trying to teach my VBS lesson to a bunch of 5-year-olds. When I paused and used the hand gesture, they all gasped, and one of them nearly fell off their seat. The reasoning behind my username actually comes from this incident, as it was whispered from the back row, Shetani Mzungu, the white devil, in Kiswahili. Smiling. In the US it's common courtesy, but when I went to Jordan, women smiling was looked down upon and scandalous. In China if you say please and thank you to your friends or family, they think you're being fake. They believe people that close don't need to express that because it's already understood by the course relationship. Answer how are you with a brush of non-committal answer. Alright, we were just talking about this during dinner. Differences in table manners and how my mom figured out the differences between the Dutch and the American. Like having one hand on your lap while eating. My mom does this, and when she first met my grandparents, they're Dutch, they thought she was very rude doing that but didn't say anything. In the Netherlands you should keep both hands above the table. This stems from the ye olden days where people were afraid that you'd have a knife under the table. She on the other hand was doing what she was told to be good manners. She also switches her fork from her left to her right hand after she is done cutting and puts down the knife. This was also a big no-no for my grandparents. So she is up to 2 strikes on her first visit just after eating. Later they are having tea. Well, they ask her if she wants to drink something and she says coffee, and they think that is very weird because it's tea time, and they offer her a cookie and then put the plate of cookies on the table. So after a while she decides to take a second cookie cause the plate was right in front of her. Strike 3. My grandparents didn't approve and my dad just thought it was hilarious and didn't explain the situation. Only after a couple of years he explained to them that what she was doing was considered very proper in America and was showing her good manners. They still don't approve. Smiling at strangers. In many places, it's either threatening or a sign of mental illness. Indian here. Moving out of your house. I understand the Western world sees moving out of your house when you're an adult a compulsion, while most Indians stay with their families and eventually end up taking care of their parents. I find it a bit weird that Americans find it kitsch when people are still staying at home with their parents when they're over a certain age. Just to be clear, we all move out at some time, but there's like no social stigma associated with staying with your parents if you have to. What religion are you? I'm from Ireland, so it was not uncommon to be asked if I was Catholic or Protestant. Or even better, do you favor the IRA? A coworker spent some time in Indonesia for work. He was having a work planning meeting at his house with some of his co-workers, 3 men, 2 women, all of whom were also from other countries, and didn't think anything of it. The next day, the neighborhood elder stopped by and told him that it was not okay that he had women in his house that he wasn't married to. He said that the elder didn't outright threaten him, but the implication was pretty clear. Don't do it again. Surprised no one's mentioned calling women you don't know mom. In a lot of southern states, it's treated as the height of respect, but in a lot of other places, it's the equivalent to calling someone hey you, old lady. Mom jokes. It's okay in USA, not for everybody, but it's pretty common. Here in Russia it's like a taboo. Most offensive mom expression we got here: fricked your mom. And you don't want to say it to immigrant from Caucasian region. They got knives and guns. It's also a generational thing in the USA. I wouldn't make a joke about someone's mom if they're over 50. For one thing, their mom is probably dead, so it's not so funny, but they're also much more likely to find the whole concept entirely offensive. Thank you for your service. From what I've seen, it's extremely awkward to do this to a soldier in the UK. I'm not in the military myself, but I've been around people who have had it happen to them. They've taken it as if the person has tried to use the fact you're in the army as a way to pat themselves on the back for being so grateful. It's bad. The way Americans interact with professors and teachers. As an Indian who is in the US for his graduate studies, I find it sometimes edging on disrespectful the way students interact with teachers. Back in India, there is a lot of respect given to teachers, so much so their informality that is maintained between students here is slightly scary. I remember in about the first 2 weeks over here, a professor handed out a pop quiz for the 3rd consecutive class at the beginning of the class, and one of the guys just exclaimed, "Professor, another quiz? Have mercy, Professor." And I swear I was only thinking at that time that, man, this guy's gonna be kicked out of this class for good, sent home and banished from the university. And instead the professor looked at him and smiled and actually laughed. He just agreed that he felt it was too much, but reassured all of us that he was only doing it for us to better understand the course. Use the national flag everywhere in Mexico is illegal. It's disrespectful. In the US, someone dropped $1 on the street. Let me help you by pinning it to the ground with my toe so it doesn't blow away in this crazy wind. In Thailand, don't ever step on money, like, ever. When I moved to Hong Kong, I had to learn to motion for cabs and call people over by keeping my palm facing the ground and motioning with my fingers. In the States we usually motion people over with our palms facing up. In HK, and some other places in Asia, only a dog or a prostitute is called over with the palm up finger waggle motion. Respond to a thank you with a MMMHM. I've only experienced this in the South though. That's one I'm trying to not do. Trying to say you're welcome feels unnatural to me. As a Brit, when I say thank you to an American, and they reply with a rather than you're welcome or no problem, it always seems very rude, though I know it isn't intended that way. Things I might say instead of you're welcome: sure thing, no worries, yep, right on, no problem, yep man, of course, anytime, or any combination of the above, right on, man, anytime or sure thing, no worries, depending on context. I also respond to a thank you with another thank you. Things my non-American husband has called me a barbarian for: 1. Drinking hot coffee with dinner. That's uncivilized and weird. 2. Not immediately taking my shoes off when I get inside. 3. Drinking iced coffee and asking for it in a to-go cup. Scandinavians take their coffee very seriously. Things he has noted about my American family: 1. They always ask him how are you instead of saying hello. 2. They are much louder than everybody else except British people on holiday, who really take the cake as the most obnoxious group of tourists to sit next to in a restaurant. Calling black people African American. My mom literally could not understand why the black Irish guy we met a few weeks ago was not African American. I even said he's not from Africa or America and she goes, yeah but he's black though. Drive on the right hand side of the road. Everyone in Britain honks at you and curses when you do that. I curse at people that drive on the left as well, so it balances out. Calling older people by their first name instead of sir and mom. It's seen as disrespectful in many countries. Using the left hand for some things. In certain countries, mostly in the Middle East, India, and parts of Africa, the left hand is considered very dirty because, historically, that was the hand used for certain sanitary activities. So using it to initiate a handshake, touch food, touch someone else, or present a gift can be considered pretty disgusting in some places. Jokes on them. I wipe with the right. I also wash my dang hands, however. In the US it is polite to not waste your food, finishing everything on your plate. In China, it is impolite to finish all your food, as it implies that the hosts did not provide enough food for you. I am not sure it fits the polite category, but most Americans keep their shoes inside and that's just not something you do here. I've noticed that in America it's regional based on climate. I grew up in the Midwest where it's snowy or muddy for most of the year. I always took my shoes off inside. My friends from out west desert area think it's hilarious. I judge it on a case-by-case basis now. If I see any sign of carpet, they are coming off immediately. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.